But I want to let you know just a little bit about us. So we are out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I know many of you are in the Charlotte area, but we've kind of opened this up with virtual events, and we've got people joining in from all over, which is really, really cool. If you want to keep up with us and what we're doing and where we are, you'll find us on Meetup. We're really easy to find there. It's casug.org. That's casug.org. And that'll redirect you to our Meetup page, site, whatever Meetup is. Join in there, participate in the conversation. Things like job postings and message board are all open for members there. We've got quite a few members there. So definitely check out Meetup, and we post all of our new events through there. Register through there, and then you'll be able to join in meetings like you are here this evening. Outside of that, we're on social media, pretty much all the major social media players. We're not on Instagram because, well, I mean, we could take pictures of Sharepoint, but I think we've all seen those at this juncture. But follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube. We're making a concentrated effort here this year to get more of our stuff on YouTube. Just a great way to keep people engaged. People that aren't able to attend live, post it up on the YouTube channel, and you can go back and you can watch the meeting after the fact. So definitely check out our YouTube channel, and I'll post these links in the chat window for those of you that are here this evening, so you can check that out. But this is a great place to keep up to date with what's happening in some of our talks. But yeah, we've got a Facebook group, LinkedIn group, Twitter. We even still have a Yammer. Yammer's not as active as it was before, but we still have a Yammer, and we do some internal job postings in there for anybody that's is interested in that. All right. Well, I'm gonna, I guess, a little bit of kind of what's coming down the line. I don't have any slides for it, but I do want to formally announce that in our upcoming May user group meeting, we are excited to welcome Susan Hanley, Microsoft MVP, all things SharePoint intranets, and now Microsoft Viva. Sue is going to do a talk about Viva and intranets, and she's kind of the foremost thought leader when it comes to working in these spaces. She actually contributes a ton of content to Microsoft for this, a lot of blogs and publications. She delivers workshops and trainings and contract work on this with companies large and small all over the country. But she's kind of the intranet guru, if you will. And she's going to be delivering a talk for us in May, and that's going to be on SharePoint intranets and Microsoft Viva. If you are new to Microsoft 365, if you're new to SharePoint Online, moving into the cloud, this is going to be a really great conversation, and we are doing this one conversation-based on how to leverage SharePoint as an intranet, as the center for things like news and announcements and update and organizational information. And then we're going to talk about how that ties into Microsoft Viva. Viva was something that was announced a couple of months ago, and Viva is going to have four main pillars. And one of the ones we're going to be concentrating on is Viva Connect. And that's going to bring some functionality into intranets. It's going to bring some functionality into Microsoft Teams, and it's going to continue to blur the line with Microsoft 365. Rather than having to switch from app to app to app to get to the things that you need, this is going to start really bringing things into Teams, which is quickly becoming kind of the front of that intranet experience in Microsoft 365. Teams is that one tool that really brings all of those different tools and technologies into one application. You minimize context switching with this. You drive adoption with this tool. And we've seen numbers grow significantly, staggeringly over just the last year alone. The last set of numbers Microsoft gave us, they have over 115 million daily active users, 115 million, which is pretty incredible considering a year ago they were sitting around like 20 million active daily users. Now, granted, the pandemic had something to do with that, but based off of the way that Teams has been such a game changer over the last couple of years, Microsoft is continuing to push that investment. And so there's going to be some really cool things coming, and Viva is going to be a part of that. So check out our May talk with Susan Hanley. That was going to be a lot of fun. And then coming up in June, we are very lucky to have Joanne Klein. For those of you that don't know Joanne, Joanne is pretty much the expert's expert on retention policies, records management in Microsoft 365. Joanne has a number of contributions all across the industry with this. Her blog is one of the most active blogs I've ever seen, and I've done a number of talks and things with her over the years, but she's definitely one of the thought leaders when it comes to records retention. Joanne asks all the hard questions, and she's the one that plays Stump the Instructor with all the engineers back at Microsoft that are actually releasing these products. So we're going to talk about record management and retention for Microsoft 365. It's not what record management was to SharePoint. It's much broader. It hits not only SharePoint, but it hits OneDrive, it hits Outlook and Exchange, it hits Microsoft Teams. And so we're going to have a conversation around records management and rethinking your approach to this. If you're not an admin and you don't have access to it, you probably didn't know that there was a security and compliance center built into Microsoft 365. And this is a great way to kind of put some global policies on top of these retention guidelines and compliance guidelines that we need and minimize what the end user has to do. And that's been one of the biggest complaints about previous versions of SharePoint. The records management was definitely end user heavy. And this new approach is a completely different way of looking at that. But Joanne asks all the hard questions. She gets all the hard answers, and she doesn't stop until she finds the solution, which is pretty awesome. If you've never been to her blog, we'll make sure there's some links out there for it when we post her event. But her blog's awesome, and the content that she delivers is just absolutely amazing. So she's going to be speaking for us in June. Really looking forward to that. Outside of that, the calendar is wide open from July on. So if you're interested in speaking, if you know anybody that is interested in speaking, or if there's a topic that you want us to cover, let us know, and we will do our best to find someone to deliver that topic or something similar to that topic. We know a lot of people in the industry. We have people from many different user groups represented here this evening, but we got a lot of friends in this community, the best community in tech. And so we'll try to find somebody to meet one of those roles. All right, with that, we're here tonight because you all are really interested in learning about external sharing in Microsoft 365. I've delivered a couple of talks, and I've got some more content coming up on this in the next couple of months. I'm really looking forward to delivering that. But external sharing in Microsoft 365, this is something that is kind of confusing for not only end users, but also for admins, whether it's a site collection administrator or whether it's somebody that is SharePoint administrator, or someone works as a Microsoft 365 admin. So we want to kind of break down external sharing, what we can do with it, and what that means for you and your organization. Now, for those of you that don't know me, my name's Andy. I am one of the organizers here for the Charlotte area SharePoint user group. I deliver these monthly meetings, help run the group, help put together SharePoint Saturdays. Hopefully, at some point in the next year, we'll be able to meet in person once again, face to face. I would really like to see everyone's smiling faces. I am based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been a Microsoft certified trainer, and I'm a Microsoft MVP for Office apps and services. I specialize in SharePoint, Microsoft 365, Microsoft Teams, the Power Platform, and pretty much everything underneath that umbrella. I'm a glutton for punishment. I deliver training, consulting, coaching services, and I run my own company called upskilltech.com. I also contract with C Prime Learning, formerly ASPE Training, doing SharePoint training and courseware and development over there. You'll find me on YouTube, got a couple of YouTube channels. I'm not as active as Daniel Christian, but I'm working on it. I got a ways to go. I don't know how he does it, but check out Daniel's stuff. It's really awesome. You'll find me on LinkedIn as William. I'm William Andrew. I go by Andy. And then you'll find me on Twitter as Andy Huneycutt. And I'm one of the weird Honeycutts. I'm with a U, Huneycutt. So that's a little bit too much about me and my background. Why don't we go ahead and dive into tonight's session? So Microsoft 365. This is a platform of different tools and technologies. that when you start working with it can really increase your productivity, really increase your efficiency within the workplace. Now, when you start working with Microsoft 365, this is a whole different ballgame versus what you may have worked with file shares hosted behind your firewall for your on-premise installation, or if you've worked with a previous version of SharePoint 2010 on-premises, 2013 on-premises. Some of you worked with SharePoint even further back than that. This is a completely different platform, and things are significantly different here, and there's change associated with that. And with that change, we often run into things like uncertainty and insecurity when it comes to some of these tools. And one of the biggest areas that we actually have to deal with this is in external sharing. This means taking content that's in our SharePoint Online, or that's in our OneDrive for Business accounts, or that's associated with Microsoft Teams, taking that content and perhaps opening that content up to some of our partners and customers and people that are outside of the company. So what we want to talk about here tonight is just a high level of how external sharing works. And I'm going to give you two perspectives on that. I want to show you how it works from the end user point of view, but I also want to show you from an admin point of view what it looks like. And if you're an admin, pay attention to how it applies from the end user point of view. That can really help you to answer a lot of questions that those end users are going to be faced with. We're going to talk about how to manage some of the external sharing settings, how to limit some of the external sharing, how to manage it, how to take kind of a light touch approach to it, to allow it with controls. And then we're going to talk about some of how this affects your collaboration as a team. Once you start working in Microsoft 365, you're working with other people. And now, as we're all working remote, it's even more important to be able to work with other people and contribute to the goals of the team. Now, that being said, the one thing that a lot of organizations are going to try to do is turn it all off. Turn all the external sharing off. And I'm not going to give you a presentation on what happens when you do that, but when you turn off all the external sharing, I just want you to know users will find a way. They will find a way to share that content, and a lot of times they're going to do it outside of the supervision of your IT team, your security, your compliance, and your governance. They're going to turn to using tools that allow them to get that work done, but may not be secure, that may not be in line with your business objectives, and might accidentally expose information that you didn't want exposed. So if your approach is to just turn everything off and stop users from using it, I just want to let you know that's not going to work. Much like, and I'm going to paraphrase the character Ian Malcolm, life finds a way, end users find a way. So just know that you can turn it off, but users are going to still be able to share things outside of your supervision. So that being said, I'm going to hop off my soapbox, and then we're going to go back in, and let's talk about Microsoft 365. So in Microsoft 365, you're going to find that Microsoft has set this up to be self-service solution. And as a recommendation, and this is just from years of experience with clients big and small, I've found that if you kind of go with the way that Microsoft's envisioning this, and you take a light touch or an admin kind of compliance and policies-based approach, you can secure the system while giving the users the freedom to work in the ways that they actually need to work. So the first thing I want to mention is creation of things like Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365 groups, as well as SharePoint sites. These things are set up to be self-service. They're set up to be turned on right away. Users can create their own teams, they can create their own groups, and they can create their own SharePoint sites. That being said, they can do this in about 20 different ways. As soon as you turn off one, there's 19 others that they're going to be able to use. And if you try to turn them all off, it's like whack-a-mole. You're gonna find that they're still gonna find a way. So with that being said, allowing users to create teams, allowing users to create groups and sites is definitely something as the admin you've got to learn to live with. You can put policies on place on top of this. You can use your security and compliance tools, and you can keep control of it. But just know that this system is set up for self-service site creation, and many of us aren't comfortable with that. We've come from environments where things have to be locked down, where we have to have provisioning processes in place, and this is a complete culture shift when you get to the cloud. So the other thing that we really need to understand is how integrated these tools are. SharePoint, Microsoft 365 groups, and Teams, they're all one living organism, and they work together. You create a Microsoft team, well, there's a SharePoint site on the back end of that, and there's a Microsoft 365 group that allows membership, access control, security, and permissions to that. It also connects it to other applications like OneNote and Microsoft Planner and gives you that integrated experience in Teams for collaboration, communication, and content management. So these are definitely integrated systems. And if you try to take one piece of the system away, the rest of it's not going to function appropriately. Scott and I were having a conversation as we were getting this meeting started about working with Teams and not having the ability to work with Microsoft 365 groups. It's going to lead to a very frustrating experience. Also, let's say you're working with Teams and you try to turn off SharePoint entirely. You're not going to be able to share files. You're not going to be able to store documents related to those teams. And then Teams just becomes a fancy chat application. Now, other Office applications like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, they've got a lot of collaboration features that are built into them. And some of the things that they're going to be able to do, like co-authoring, add mentions, those are going to be fully integrated into some of the things that we talk about for a sharing perspective. But they're also integrated with things like security labels, sensitivity labels, data loss prevention, retention. So I want you to know that, because hopefully it provides peace of mind. If somebody creates something in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and they store it in SharePoint, OneDrive, or Microsoft Teams, any of the sensitivity labels, data loss prevention, retention guidelines, security and compliance that we place on those objects are going to pass down to those items inside of it. So it does apply at a global level all the way down to the granular level. And then SharePoint has shared libraries. These are places for us to store files and content and work with that information. And for a lot of organizations, especially those of you that are just moving to the cloud, you're coming from maybe a SharePoint on-prem environment, or perhaps you're coming from a file share heavy environment. And so you kind of need to unthink what you know about file shares and open it up to SharePoint's capabilities. It's more than just libraries. It's more than just files. SharePoint's lists and libraries and pages. It's collaboration. It's communication. And that also extends into OneDrive. And OneDrive is that private place for users to work. That's my drive. But it's in the cloud, and it means I can work from anywhere, whether I'm home, whether I'm on the road, whether I'm in the office, in my office, or another part of the facility. Just know that SharePoint and OneDrive are very, very tightly integrated, and OneDrive is going to be a big part of our conversation tonight as well. So I'm going to start off this talk around the SharePoint perspective. Many of us come from SharePoint, and so I'm going to start there, and then we're going to kind of branch from that. So one of the first things I want to mention is when you start working here, the things that you migrate from your on-premises environment are still going to work. You might have some classic elements, but a lot of this is actually going to be modern. Now, I'm not going to go on a spiel about modern, done that in previous presentations, but if you have questions about that, kind of save those for the end, and I'll circle back to and spend some time with that. But I want to talk about SharePoint sites as we know it, and then kind of the evolution a little bit. Many of us come from team sites or project sites. That was a place for document libraries and some pages and some lists, and a place for people to work. And in those sites, we worked with things like the default SharePoint permissions and groups. So in a typical SharePoint site, you had 3 primary groups when the site was provisioned. You had your owners, your members, and your visitors. Those groups have permission levels associated with them. Site owners were full control, site members were edit, and then visitors were read-only. Then you would add a person, you would add people, or maybe even like a security group or a distribution list to one of those groups, and you would grant access to the SharePoint site and everything that inherited permissions from that SharePoint site. And that includes all the lists and libraries, the folders, the content, the documents, and even the subsites that were there. That model still exists today, and that model still works in Microsoft 365 today. So the primary way that we continue to work with this content is through SharePoint groups, permission levels, granular permissions, and then adding or removing users to those groups. But you're going to find very quickly when you get into Microsoft 365 that it extends just a little bit. And it's kind of a preview of some things that are to come, but I want to point this out. Notice here we've got site sharing. At this level, the site owner can choose how the users within the site are going to be able to share content. That's outside of the normal permission model. That's granting access to content directly outside of a permission model. I'm going to talk more about that in a bit. Also, there's this thing in SharePoint Online called hubs. And hubs allow us to flatten site collections, to create kind of a center spoke, and then associate sites through navigation. And then in turn, you can pass things like permissions to the associated sites. So if you are working with the hub model in SharePoint Online, there are now permissions specific to hubs that can extend from that SharePoint site and hubify and then pass those permissions on. So just quickly, I just want to show you this kind of live. So I'm going to head in. I've got some training sites set up here, and this is one of them. This is actually part of a hub, and I know this is part of a hub for a couple of reasons. If I look right up here at the top, this is my hub navigation right over here. Now we still have things like the quick launch navigation. We still have maybe the top link bar right over in this area, but we've got hub navigation at the top. So this is a hubified site. It's associated with a hub, and the center of the hub is actually this instructor site right over here. So I'm going to navigate to that real quick. All right, so I'm at the center of my hub. Now I'm going to go up to the gear icon. I'm going to go and I'm going to select my site permissions, and right away I can see there are my owners, my members, and my visitors. Now this is a communication site. Think about the publishing sites that you may have used with in previous versions of SharePoint. This is kind of the modern version of that. So it uses the basic permission model, owners, members, and visitors. Now up here at the top, I've got this hub thing. So hub, and you can sync permissions to the associated sites. So right from here, I have the ability to take the permissions from the hub and any site that's associated with the hub, extend those permissions. Think about a site collection with subsites underneath it, and the subsites are inheriting from the parent. It's kind of a similar scenario, but in this situation, we're not using subsites. All the sites associated with this hub are top-level site collection sites. And so we can associate the permissions and groups and visitor access, and we can push that off to the other entities in the hub if we need. So we can control that from there. So that's a little bit different than what you might be used to. Now in site permissions, we got the default groups. You can go into your advanced permission page, and you're going to find that the permissions there are what we've worked with in SharePoint for many, many years. This is basically the same SharePoint permissions page that we've had 10 plus years now. So you've got your ability to create and manage groups inside of here. You've got your ability to work within groups, and you can add and remove users inside of here. It's the same structure that you've worked with previously, but through that hub association, we can extend that a little bit. The other thing I'll point out, and I'll go into site permissions and show this, is how members can share. Now this is a little bit different. If I'm a site owner, I can put some permissions on the site and control how a user shares. Now remember, share is outside of a SharePoint group. Share is using like a share command that we're going to talk a little bit more about in just a few minutes. But as the site owner, I have the ability to change the sharing permissions. The default is that site owners and members can share files, and then anybody with edit permissions can share files and folders. But I can drop that down. I can say that people with edit permissions, they can share and work with content, but maybe only the site owner can share the site, or maybe I can limit that even further. So I can control the sharing at a couple of different levels of the site or the content, but I can also choose who can manage some of the access requests. This is helpful if you're in an environment where you have a lot of highly trained site owners that really understand SharePoint permissions and what they're doing. We can kind of offload some of this burden from our IT team and pass it on to them. But that's a little bit newer in the SharePoint world, is that site sharing model. So right away, we've already introduced a couple of new concepts. We've introduced the hub association, and now we've talked about some of the sharing in there. But the core of this, SharePoint groups, permission levels, and permissions, that's the same as it's always been. Now let's take it a step further. You're going to find that we have a different type of team site available in Microsoft 365. This is a team site not as, necessarily associated with Microsoft Teams, but it could be associated with Microsoft Teams. This site is actually associated with a Microsoft 365 group. A Microsoft 365 group is kind of a permission object that in this case is nested underneath the default SharePoint groups that are actually there. The difference is the Microsoft 365 group allows you to pass a similar set of permissions to other objects in Microsoft 365. So like I might have people that have access to this SharePoint site, and they might also have access to Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Planner, a OneNote notebook, and in some cases maybe even Exchange, shared mailbox, and a shared calendar inside of that. If I adjust the membership inside of the Microsoft 365 group, it adjusts the membership in all of these applications that you see here. But the part that gets really interesting is the SharePoint site still uses the core SharePoint groups, so owners, members, and visitors, and I can add people to just the SharePoint site and not have them added to the Office 365 group and all the associated other objects. So like I can have people that run a site contribute and build content as part of a Microsoft 365 group, and then I can still have visitors who just come and consume information, and I don't have to worry about managing their permissions in these other objects. I can just manage their permissions at the SharePoint site level. So the Microsoft 365 group model, we've had that for a few years now, but we really have to kind of think about when we start adding users to these things, do they need access to all this stuff, or they need access to just this piece or that piece, and kind of where do they need it? And to really make things fun, Microsoft has done a little bit of this for us. You can take like a classic SharePoint site and you can groupify that. Now, I've done talks on this in the past, but simply put, when you groupify, you associate this site with those other objects in Microsoft 365. That's where this nested kind of permission comes into play. You can groupify and you can extend the site. You can only do that groupify with a top level site. So you can groupify a top level site. So you need to flatten in order to do that. And then once you groupify, you can also have some fun and you can teamify. That means you can associate this SharePoint site with a Microsoft team and take advantage of everything that's great about Teams. Now, when you teamify, you're going to limit the mail and the calendar. They are technically still available, but they're hidden objects because you're using Teams for your main communication. And so those things are kind of removed from direct access from users, even though they're still out there. So Microsoft 365 groups and then Microsoft Teams kind of shift our way of thinking a little bit more as it relates not only to the default SharePoint groups that we work with, but also to the other objects now that might be associated with that group. So this is just a Microsoft 365 group. There's no team association. And the way that you know that there's a team association with it, you can actually just hover over the name of the team up here, and you'll get this little pop-up, and it'll tell you permissions, who's in the groups, and it'll tell you if it's associated with Teams or not. Also, you'll know that it's not connected to a team because there'll be a nice little message down here in the corner that says, "Do you want to teamify this site?" So you'll see that down in the corner. And then if it's just a Microsoft 365 group, when you hover over the name of the site, the card pops up. It'll show you the objects that you see here. That way you know it's associated with the group. And here's that little, do you want to connect to a Teams message that I was just mentioning a moment ago? So you can groupify, you can teamify, but the core of the site itself is still going to be based off of the default SharePoint permissions. So when it comes to SharePoint permissions, they're based off of groups. Groups get permission levels and then granular permissions. That hasn't actually changed. Go to the gear icon, select your site permissions. You can manage it at that particular level. And then I showed you the hub association, also showed you the sharing considerations. So let's dive a little bit more into that. If I go to that gear icon and I select share, I can share the site, but share is a little misleading in that particular situation. Because you're going to be adding somebody to the site, and in turn, you're going to be adding them to a Microsoft or to the SharePoint group, and then you're going to be granting an associated permission level with them. So in this particular situation, what Share actually is doing is it's granting access to the site via SharePoint permission group. So Share is going to allow me to add somebody into the site through that SharePoint permission group. And depending on the type of site, it might not necessarily pass into Microsoft 365 groups or Microsoft Teams. So in this situation, and I'll show you this live, like I'm going to go to my site. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say share site and so say, add users. So you start looking up like a user, it pulls from your directory. You find the person that you want. And then it's going to say, well, what kind of control do you want to give them? Read, full control, or edit. It doesn't use the SharePoint group names, and it's using the defaults, owners, members, and visitors. So read means visitor, edit means that they're going to be a member, and then full control means that they're going to be an owner. So I'm actually granting them access to the site with one of those SharePoint groups that I have. And so in this case, I'm sharing the site, and that's going to drop them into one of the associated groups right down below. So I should be able to expand this and see, okay, there's that student that I just added rather to the edit based group. Now, changing their permissions is straightforward. I can go in, select the person from the list, and then I can just change the permission, drop them into a different group if I need to, and I can control access to the groups or the SharePoint site that way. So in this case, share means grant access to the actual site. And that in turn provides SharePoint permissions, permission levels, and controls. All right, so going a little bit deeper into this, I've already mentioned the site sharing options. I just kind of previewed this. This is in the slide, but I just want to point out, as the site owner or somebody with full control, I can choose what they can do when they click a share button inside of the site. So a lot of this extends beyond sharing the site itself. It means sharing lists and library content within the site, files and folders, for instance. We can lower some of those permissions inside of there if we need to. So the default is that the site owners and members can share files, folders, and the site. But what if I don't want you to share the site? What if you're in the members group and I don't want you to share the site? I can lower that. You can still share files and folders, but you can't share the site. Only the owner can do that. Or if I don't want you sharing files and folders at all, if I want to control everything through my permission groups, I can lower that down to just the setting for only the owners can share files, folders, and the site. And that's via the share command. And then as it comes to granting access requests, we can turn that on or off from here. And then you can say the owners group can handle it, or you could say a specific email or set of emails could do that. We used to do a lot of this in the backstage area, site settings and then site permissions. They're bringing a lot of this to the forefront now. A lot of this is just on pop-up menus on the forefront. So I would go here, adjust the settings. There's a specific email, enter in the name of the email that I want to use. And now that person would actually be able to manage access requests in addition to me as the owner of the site. All right, so that's a little bit about sharing the site and then some of the things that a site owner can actually do. All right, so let's continue. When you share files inside of a SharePoint site, typically the files are related to the permissions of the site. So site owners, members, and visitors are assigned a permission level, and that controls whether they can add, edit, update, delete, and they can work with content. Most of the lists and libraries in the site pull their permissions from the site through the inheritance model that we've already worked with. But what if you have a file or folder and you need to share that with somebody outside of the site? Now, you could create unique permissions. You could grant unique permissions on a folder or an object, And you could add that user to a group that has access through those unique permissions and do it that way. But from experience, that is the worst experience in the world. Granting unique permissions, keeping track of unique permissions, managing unique permissions, and then unraveling unique permissions is the thing that I hate most in this ecosystem. I don't like it at all. But there are times that you still have to do that. But what if I just need to grant access to a couple of files or a folder for somebody on another team, and I don't necessarily want to rebuild my whole permission model to do that? That's where the share command is going to come into play. We can use the share command and share files or a folder with someone and grant them access to that content and not have to deal with unique permissions and not have to rebuild our permission model and go back and clean it up after the fact. So you'll find share in SharePoint and OneDrive and in Microsoft Teams and in Office. It shows up in a number of different places. We can use the share command to grant access to just that content and nothing else. And for the admins out there, we have controls over this. We can have a share command that only lasts for N number of days. We can password protect it. We can put blocks on that content. We're going to have controls over how users share, and we can get reporting over that. But also as a site owner, I can limit what my users can share even beyond some of the default company policies if I need. So this allows me to share files and folders and then just determine what people can do with those shared links. So you'll see it in SharePoint, got it screenshotted at the top. You'll see it in OneDrive down at the bottom. What you're actually looking for here, this is your share option. This allows us to control the level of sharing with those users. So in this case, you also see it up in the command bar. It's the same thing. They both do the same thing, both of these. But you're granting direct or like limited access to that particular file and nothing else in that object, whether it's a folder in your OneDrive or whether it's a document library or folder in your SharePoint site, and by extension, Microsoft Teams. So share also extends into Office. So if I'm working in Microsoft Office, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, I'm going to be able to use the share command right inside of Office. Now, I screenshotted this on a couple of different systems. This works in the web browser and Office Online. This works in the desktop apps on both Windows and Mac. You can go in, open a file, edit to your heart's content, save it back to SharePoint or OneDrive or wherever, and then you can use the share command directly from Office to grant access to the file from a colleague, internal or external. You're also going to be able to do this with the OneDrive Sync client. Now, for those of you that don't know much about the OneDrive Sync client, shameless plug, I'm doing a couple of blog articles for Quest on that. I'll post links to that a little bit later. But the OneDrive Sync client allows us to take content that's in SharePoint and OneDrive and synchronize a copy of that to our local operating system, to have an offline copy of that and to be able to work with it locally when you need it. Any changes that you make local will sync back to the cloud. It still uses the same kind of security and controls that Microsoft 365 uses, but it just allows users to work offline. Say, for example, when we go back to a world where we can travel, I want to work on a document while I'm on a plane. I can have a copy of it offline, work on it, and whenever I get to my destination, get back to the internet connection, it'll upload all my changes right back seamlessly. The OneDrive Sync client works with OneDrive, both private OneDrive and OneDrive for work or for school, but it also works with SharePoint. You can synchronize the contents of a SharePoint document library offline, and then it works just like a normal folder on your local operating system. And if you're working with Microsoft Teams, Teams is built on top of SharePoint. Those files that you work with inside of your channels can be synchronized using the OneDrive Sync client, and you can access those offline or locally as well. So for those users that really like Files Explorer and they like having that local copy of it, we can use the OneDrive Sync client unsynchronized, and the share command works there as well. For those of us that work on a Mac, the Finder, we're going to be able to use the OneDrive Sync client there as well. And when we synchronize with OneDrive, there's a share command built in that allows us to share from our local operating system, and it'll pass through Microsoft 365 and do the same thing that we've seen in the last couple of screenshots. And this is rolling out right now. It's in my tenant. Hopefully you'll see it here soon, but inside of Microsoft Teams, if I'm in a document or if I'm in the Files tab inside of Teams as part of a channel, I'm going to be able to share from there. When I upload a file, I'm going to be able to select a drop-down, choose the level of sharing, and open this up for people that are beyond the access or the membership of my Microsoft team. So the share command is going to work in Teams. It's already started rolling out. I've already seen it in my tenant, and it should be rolling out in your tenant here in the near future, unless you happen to have like a GCC or a DoD tenant, then it's going to be a little while perhaps before you see that. So just quickly, let me go in, just show you a little bit around share. I've got a couple of different sites here. So I'm going to go into my document library. Let's say I upload a file. Just going to grab a file from my local operating system, do this annual report. All right, so I'm uploading this into a SharePoint site. This is a Microsoft 365 group enabled site. All right, so I've got the file in here. The people that have access to this are the same people that have access through my default site permissions, my owners, my members, and my visitors. Those are the people that are going to have access to it, and by extension, the Microsoft 365 group. But let's say I need to share this with a colleague outside of here. Let's say I need to share this with one of my colleagues that works in other locations. I can choose share, and I can give them essentially a link to the file. And then I can choose the level of sharing that I want to grant. I can enter in names here, and then I can choose whether they can edit or view kind of the role that they're going to have, send them a message, and then it'll handle all the communications for me. I just tell it, the level of sharing, who, the message, and then I hit send. But if I want to craft the email, here's the option right down here, craft the full email, do whatever I want with it. And then over here, I can just copy the link, maybe send it to them in a Teams chat, maybe send it to them in some other chat mechanism. But I can do that from here. And it's that easy for me to share a file with someone from my site, provided that the permission or the controls are allowed at the site level and at the organization level. So I'm going to be able to do send link from here. Now you do have some more options, and you can manage access. Now manage access is the same thing as going in and from the file, selecting the little eye icon, the info icon over here. You'll open up, when you select a file, you'll open up Manage Access. And that's going to show you like who has direct access. That means permissions to this. So these are the people that have permissions through the associated groups. And then are there any links giving access? Well, I haven't created any links yet, but I could create a link here and here, and I could create a link here. All right, so I can share the file, same menu pops up. Now what happens if I'm working in the file? Let's open it up. So I'm in Office Online. So this is Office in my web browser. All right, so I'm working on the file, and look what shows up right up in this corner right up here, Share. All right, so I'm working on the file. The file is actually saved in my SharePoint site, saved in that document library. But I can go ahead and click share. Same window pops up, allows me to share the file quick and easy right from here. Now let's say I'm working on this file in my desktop app. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. I've got Office for Mac, so the file is going to open up in Word. All right, so there's Word on my desktop. And then right up here in the corner, there's my share command. So I can go ahead, select the file, and I get the same sharing menu right from there. So I can share directly from my desktop if I need to. Now, a moment ago, I'm going to continue here. Let me just close. Yep, I'm going to close that tab out. I'm going to head back to the library. I mentioned the OneDrive for Business Sync client. All right, so the OneDrive Sync client allows us to synchronize content from the cloud and keep a version of that local if we need it. Like we have a folder associated with that. So I got my OneDrive client, I've got a folder associated with that, and these are all of my files that are stored or synchronized locally. So I have a copy that I can work with offline. Now there's some icons over here that indicate whether it's just in the cloud or whether it's synced to my local operating system. But inside of here, if I wanted to work with one of these files, here's a version of that report. I've got to share, or there's a couple of different share options. There's the share for the local operating system, and then the share for Microsoft 365. And I click on share here, and I get the same menu. These files were synced using the OneDrive sync client. So if I share here, that'll pass back to the cloud, whether it's in SharePoint, OneDrive, or associated with Teams. All right, so the share command is going to work there as well. Now I'm going to go to Teams just real quick. So just bear with me while we navigate and load Teams. All right, so here I am. I'm inside of Microsoft Teams. So we got files inside of here. We can work with the teams, edit, and so forth directly inside of here. And I don't know if it's in this tenant yet. I don't know if it's actually rolled out yet or not. Let me just try to upload a file real quick, and we'll see. So say I wanted to share this as part of a conversation with my team. All right, so I'm uploading this file, and then right here from the dropdown, share menu is going to pop up. So now it's rolled out in Teams in this particular situation, and I get some of the same level of controls that I would with the share command. So now you've actually seen this in numerous locations beyond just SharePoint. And just to bring it full circle, one more location. Let me go to OneDrive. All right, so I'm going to go to OneDrive. I got a couple of documents here. Here's a share command in OneDrive. And so I can share here inside of OneDrive as well, and I can share that content, and I don't necessarily have to deal with the permission levels and unique permissions that we've dealt with in the past. So it extends to OneDrive also, and then by extension, the OneDrive sync client. So share is going to be the main tool that we use to share content with people outside of our team, whether they work for our organization, whether they're external to the organization, perhaps they are someone that works as a partner or an entity that we're affiliated with. Share is going to allow us to grant them access to that content and not have to rebuild our permission model, and that's big. So let's talk about the share and the link settings and the various commands there. I'm going to go through the four primaries that we see here. Anyone with the link, people with the link, specific people. I'm going to go through that scenario, and then I'll talk about other settings and what that actually means. So we'll start away with the primary one, anyone with the link. So anyone with the link, that's the default in most organizations, but as an admin, I can turn that off. Now, anyone with a link literally means anyone, internal and external to the company. So this could be people inside and outside of our organization, and they can pass this link around. We'll talk about that more in just a minute. These people do not have to authenticate, and their access in many cases cannot be audited. So a lot of organizations, we're going to turn this one off, and I'll show you how to do that in just a bit. Now, anyone with the link also gives me the ability to allow people to edit, to open in review mode, to set an expiration date, to have a password associated with the file, as well as to block the download of the file. But this is what an end user could potentially select when they need to share something externally. So anyone with the link, we call this a transferable, revocable secret key. It's transferable because I can pass it to Scott. Scott doesn't work in my organization, and Scott can turn around and pass that to Roberta, and Roberta could turn around and pass that to Jennifer, and this link could just be passed around. It's transferable. You can send it to anyone. It's revocable because I can go and actually delete that link. So if I don't want anybody using the link, once I share it, then I can go back and I can actually delete it and I can get rid of it. It's secret because you can't guess it. If you've ever looked at a shared link, it's a bunch of gibberish. I'll show you what it looks like in just a second, but you can't guess it. And then the only way to get access is to get the link, but because anyone could have it, anyone could actually share that and maybe post it, in a place that I don't want. All right, so let's actually look at that one real quick. So I'm going to go into my site. All right, so in the site, and I'm just going to actually, I need to be in the site. Where's my site? Sorry. People are coming and joining the meeting. All right, so here's my annual report. I'm going to go ahead and notice my anyone is actually disabled. And so in my SharePoint site, my anyone is actually disabled. I can't use that one in SharePoint. Interesting. All right, let's go over to OneDrive. Then I go to OneDrive, and anyone is available in OneDrive. So OneDrive and SharePoint can be maintained independently at the admin level. We'll see that again in just a minute. So anyone with the link, I can say like, you know, I'm going to allow editing. I could allow them to open this in review mode. If you haven't seen review mode, it's really cool. They can make comments on the file through the comments tool in Word, but they can't make any changes to the body of the document. That's pretty neat. I can set an expiration date. Now, in this case, it already filled this out, May 22nd, 2021. Well, it's April 22nd, so it looks like the company has a 30-day policy on that. That's an admin setting. I can set a password on this. So I can set the password, and I would need to provide that password to anybody who got this link for them to use it. And if I uncheck allow editing, I can make this read-only. By default, unchecking is read-only. I can block the download. So like you can just read it in a web browser, but you can't download an actual copy of that from here. All right, so I would say anyone with the link, and then I would apply, and then I could actually send that to whoever I wanted. So like I could send that to, you know, student. I'll send it to my student one account. Actually, I don't have a student one in this environment. Tell you what. I'll send it to Andy. I'll send it to me. And then I'm just going to go ahead and send. All right, so I've sent that. I've shared that with that particular person. So now I'm going to go and let's go and look at the information panel. And then I'm going to go to Manage Access right in here. And in Manage Access, there's a link now that's giving access to that document, and I can actually view that access. All right, I see when it expires, I see the default settings, and I see who it's actually shared with. And here's the actual link right here. So I'm just going to quickly copy that. I'm going to show you what that looks like, but I can delete the link right here. I can remove the link very quickly right here if I need, as well as make some adjustments. So I can actually control the link on a file-by-file basis or folder-by-folder basis through the information panel. All right, so let's actually look at that link. I'm just going to very quickly open a new Word document. All right, so in the document, let's go ahead and paste that in. And this is the actual link here. So this, let me just zoom in a little bit more. This is why it's hard to guess. Now, you can learn a lot from these links if you kind of look at it. For example, my.sharepoint.com, that tells me that this is actually associated with OneDrive. It's in somebody's OneDrive account versus like another version of that would be from a SharePoint site. This tells me that it's a Word document. This also tells me that it's OneDrive, and then this tells me how to get to that actual file. You can't guess that. It's complete gibberish. And there's a lot of characters there. So that's how you can actually share that link. And so if I were to pass that link to someone, you would, in theory, be able to open that document. Even though I shared that with Andy, you would actually have access to that document. Now, I'm going to throw caution to the wind. If somebody, I just posted that in the chat window. I'm going to go back to the actual document itself. If somebody wants to click on that, you should be able to just go ahead and access that document and get into it. This is the document right here. Because it's anyone, it's transferable. You should be able to get into it. So I'm going to sit tight on that for a second. But that's the anyone link. And again, as an admin, I can actually turn that off. All right, so while you're thinking about that, the next type of link is people in your organization. So this link only works for people that work in your organization. So they have to be part of your Microsoft 365 tenant. They're going to have to authenticate to that. They can forward this, though, to other people that work in your organization. So this particular link, it is a transferable link, but it's only transferable within the company. And then it is can be revoked just like the other, but this link cannot be shared outside of the organization. So it only works for people that are part of the organization. It's going to ask you to log in to verify that you are in fact part of the organization. And then when somebody opens this link, they have to be authenticated with that. And if they're not signed in, they're going to be prompted to sign in. So like I could pass this to somebody internally, but they couldn't pass it external. This is the link type that most companies are actually defaulting to. You can pass the links around internally, but not externally. All right, so just kind of quickly going back and looking at that. So like I'll go back to my SharePoint site. All right, so here's this. You'll notice that like when I went to share a moment ago, I told you that anyone with the link was actually grayed out. And then down here, people with specific access, or I'm sorry, people in the organization, that was the default. That's an admin admin setting. So in this case, the admin setting is set to just people within the organization. And so that's what I'm seeing inside of my SharePoint site. But if I go over to OneDrive and I share from there, it's defaulting to people in the organization, but I can select anyone with access. So OneDrive can be controlled independently of the two. So people in the organization with the link can pass the link around if need be. All right, so question out there is, does the people in the organization with the link, does it work for guests within the organization? So just going back to here, I believe it works for guests that are included in your Azure Active Directory. I have to double check on that, but if they're an authenticated guest within the organization, it should work with them. Can you get metrics on who has accessed the shared doc through the link? So reporting is actually a weak part of this. Now, there is some low-level reporting available, and then there's some PowerShell voodoo that you can do, but you're going to need somebody with admin rights to work with the PowerShell. So to answer the second part, can you get metrics on who has access to shared doc through the link? One of the things that you can do is the doc itself, you can go and view the doc, and then you'll see things like activity related to that. So as an end user, I can go and view activity, and it'll say high level, I accessed it, or so-and-so edited that file, but it's not a detailed report. The other thing that you can do is go to site contents. And in your site contents, you're going to have site usage. And underneath site usage, you can go down and you're going to be able to see shared with external users, and you can run a report from there. And I'm just going to ask you just a destination to save, create your folder. And then you can generate a report around that, but I haven't found a whole lot of detail in that report to be super useful with that. But as far as like additional metrics, admins through PowerShell, there's a number of things that they can actually do. And to be honest with you, I don't spend a ton of time there, but if I'm going to like do something like that, I'm probably going to lean on my friend and colleague and co-organizer Kelly Jones for some of that, because I imagine that he's done that over the past few years. And then there's some other tools you can take advantage of, ShareGate being one of them to find some of that information. All right, so let's head back. So we did people in the organization. We can pass it around within the organization, but we can't pass it external to someone outside of the organization. Now, people with existing access. This one's actually pretty simple. People with existing access mean they're part of a SharePoint group that has access to that content already. You're essentially providing them a link to something that they already have access to. So we don't have to worry about a transferable, revocable link. It's based off of permissions that they already have. So they're already part of the group association or the model. You just want to go ahead and grant that access. Specific people. This is the one that exactly who has access to my link. So I'm going to do specific people, which means the email addresses that I provide are the only people that can use that link. This means the link is not transferable. This means that the link is revocable, but I control specifically who has access to that link, and you cannot forward the link to someone else. So in this situation, it is a non-transferable link, and it can work internal and external to the organization. So even if I turn off anyone with the link, I can say specific people and still allow external access on that content beyond people that work in my company. I can send this to Scott. I can send this to Roberta, even though we're not working together. They would be able to access that content, but they can't pass that link to anyone else. So that particular link looks like this. So I go down. I choose my specific people, and let me zoom out. Go ahead and apply that, and then I can enter in the names of the person that I want to send that to, choose some of what they're going to be able to do, and then I could send that, but it's going to be specific to that person. Now, if I go back and look at the link settings, so we'll go back into manage access. I've got a couple of different links there. People you can specify can view. I can extend that, and it says, hey, this person is an external user to the organization, and my phone just went off. The links already went through to my Gmail account. So that's a link that's specific. And then I could revoke the link at any time. I can control the link and the view that they have. And again, that passes SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, OneDrive Sync as well, and even into Office. So this is the one that I use more often than not because I want control over who has the link and I don't want them passing it around. So this is what we need to educate our end users on. What does sharing actually mean? What does this share command actually do? You're granting access to someone, but are you granting too much access? Can they pass this link around? Do we want to limit some of this? And again, admin controls are coming up on that. So specific links can be internal or external, but in both cases, the user is going to have to authenticate. So if I send this to someone external, that person is going to be prompted with one email to access the item, and then another email is going to confirm that they're accessing that item. So they're going to get double confirmation there. And if, maybe if it doesn't work, they get double secret probation. All right, so the other settings that you see. So with these links up here up at the top, that controls like kind of broadly how we're going to do it. The other settings determine what we're doing. So the other settings are like, can they edit that file when you share it with them? Can they open it in review mode, expiration date, and so forth? I've covered this at a high level already. I'm just going to kind of blast through this. So if you allow editing, they can make changes to your document. Now, this is where users get a little uncomfortable because they're like, I don't want this person making changes to my document. So we have this thing called version history, and version history can track changes across different versions of the same document. How cool is that? If you're in SharePoint, the default is 500 versions. And if you're in OneDrive, it's 100 major edits of that document. So if somebody makes a change to it, I can still get to the previous version. I can still go back and review it. And here's another thing. If somebody uploads a file with the exact same file name and they override my previous document, through version history, I can restore the previous version that they overrode. So version history allows me to revert back to that. So if I allow you to edit and you make changes or you delete something, my document's not gone. I can still get back to the previous version of that. So allow editing. We can allow you to make changes to it, and then version history track and control those changes. Now, we can also set these links to be view only at the admin level. Open in review mode only. This is a newer feature in Microsoft 365, but this means you can open the document, and the only thing you can do in that document is add comments to it. You can't change the body of the text. You can comment in the margins, but you can't make any changes to the text. So that was actually really helpful. Expiration date. As an admin, I can define the expiration date and say all shared links have to expire after 30 days. The end user, though, can shorten that window. They can say this expires in 7 days. They cannot extend that window. So we can have a expiration date on that link, so we don't have to worry about going back and having links that are open for n number of days infinitely. We can control that. Set a password. I can set a password, then I just have to pass that password to that person, preferably through something like a password managing tool, like a LastPass or a 1Password or the Edge password tool. I don't know if that one does that one yet or not. But you can pass the password to that person and they can use that to get access to that file. And then if you make the document read-only, so like if you use this, if you uncheck the allow editing option, then you can go down here and you can block the download. That prevents them from downloading a copy of the file. They can view the file in their web browser, but they can't download an actual copy of the file. That doesn't stop them from taking a screenshot with their mobile phone or their camera or, you know, sketching it on an Etch-a-Sketch, but it does prevent them from downloading a copy of that. All right. So as we continue a little bit further, I'm going to get into some of the admin options now. We kind of highlighted that at a high level, but I just want to point out share and copy link. At the core, they're exactly the same thing. The only difference is share goes ahead and allows you to pick people to send the link to, email addresses, people in the system, whatever, provide a message, and then it handles all the communication for you as soon as you hit send. Copy link means you've got to do all that work. You've got to go and distribute that link to whoever needs that link and do the additional work there. So I use the share command more than the copy link, but they both work just fine. All right, so managing access. I don't know why that cut that off. Let me fix that real quick. It's what happens when you try to edit files or with a newborn and a 3-year-old in the house. Managing access. You go to the eye icon. You've seen me do this a whole bunch of times. That's where you can see all the links that are there. You can remove the links, you can control the links, but you can also view the direct access that's underneath that. So as an end user, I'm going to be able to do this. Links giving access, the first thing you see, those are your shared links. That's from the shared button. You're just sharing that piece of content and nothing else. Direct access, those links are people, or if you scroll down, direct access, those are people that have access through permission levels and direct association with that SharePoint site or that particular object. So just know links giving access, might as well say shared links. And then direct access should say SharePoint groups. So admin options. What can administrators do to control some of this? I've talked about it high level in a couple of different places. Now let's actually show you some of this. Now, you're going to find that there are approximately 5 separate locations that external sharings are at, or external sharing can be controlled in Microsoft 365. And although you might set the setting in one place, if the other location has a different setting, it can cause a conflict and it might not work the way that that you want. One of our community friends, Daniel Glenn, danielglenn.com, I believe is his website. He did a really good video where he talked about basically the 5 locations and he was playing whack-a-mole with it, and he adjusted the setting here and here and it still didn't work appropriately, and then finally found the other couple locations and he was able to dial it in. But I found these 4 locations are pretty much the primary that I work with. Azure AD, there's some settings there as it relates to Active Directory. Your Microsoft 365 group guest settings is one location to be mindful of. Your SharePoint organization level settings. So this is through the SharePoint Admin Center and the settings that are there. And then there's SharePoint site level permissions. We've seen that in the demo already. That's the things that the site owners can define through the gear icon and the site permissions. So Microsoft 365 groups. If I am a Microsoft 365 admin, I can go into my admin center. I can go through my settings, and then I can work with my organizational settings. From there, I'm going to click Services. That's the tab that's kind of highlighted on the left-hand side of the slide here, and click on Microsoft 365 Groups. The description, manage external sharing. It's pretty obvious, but it's buried underneath 3 submenus. When you get here, choose how guests from outside your organization collaborate with your users in Microsoft 365 groups. Teams membership is built on Microsoft 365 groups, and most SharePoint sites that you create now is built on Microsoft 365 groups. So the default, let group owners add people outside the organization to the group as guests. That's not only for the files and the content and the share command, that's everything that essentially is inside of that SharePoint site and possibly other Microsoft 365 applications like Planner and Stream and Teams and whatnot. Let guest group members access group content. If you don't select this, guests are still going to be selected as members of the group, but they won't receive emails. There's a couple ways to kind of turn that on or off. So this is one place that we need to have an eye on the settings. Now, the next place you need to go is the SharePoint Admin Center. As I mentioned previously, the SharePoint Admin Center, or rather SharePoint and OneDrive, are very deeply integrated. And so the SharePoint Admin Center and the OneDrive Admin Center are being integrated. They're very much merging with one another. So if I go into the SharePoint Admin Center and I go to my policies section, there's the first link underneath there is sharing. And if you select sharing, this is the menu or menus that you're going to see. Content can be shared, and you got SharePoint and OneDrive, and they sit side by side, and those sliders are dependent on one another. So you're going to see that in a second. But notice what shows up there. We've got anyone. We've got new and existing guests. We've got existing guests. And we got people in your organization. And then there's some additional settings that go along with that. So this is one of the places we're actually going to be able to control what users see from those shared links, in addition to allowing and actually working with guests. So one of the things that you'll see is these are the settings for the organization overall. So I can make some adjustments here, and then site owners can still kind of maybe make some adjustments at the site collection level independently of this. But SharePoint and OneDrive are actually integrated inside of here. So what you'll see is, like, if I lower my OneDrive settings, I can lower OneDrive independently of SharePoint. But if I start making changes to SharePoint, those changes automatically apply to OneDrive. So OneDrive can be more restrictive, and SharePoint can be a little less restrictive, especially when it comes to external sharing. So maybe we want to limit users sharing OneDrive content with external entities. Maybe we want to limit it just people within the organization. But in a SharePoint site, maybe we open it up just a little bit, because there's more people kind of involved there, more auditing on top of that. So just going to replay that one more time. I can adjust OneDrive and make it more restrictive, independent of SharePoint, but I can make SharePoint more restrictive. However, when I do that, it automatically applies to OneDrive. Now, additionally, as the site collection admin, I can limit external sharing by domain. I can also allow only people in certain security groups to share externally. I can have a setting where guests have to sign in using the same account with the sharing invitations that we've sent. We can allow guests to share items that they don't own, or we can turn that off. And then we can say that people are going to have to use a verification code. They have to re-authenticate after this many days. Additionally, in the SharePoint Admin Center, we can choose the types of file and folder links that are actually going to be available. So from the share box, do we want to default to anyone? Do we want to default to just people in the organization, or maybe just specific people? We can set that the default option. What's it going to actually highlight to? And that's what this actually is doing. So like when I go here, people within this tenant, they're going to be able, or it's defaulting to this because anyone is not available. But if I go like to my OneDrive and I select a file there, it's defaulting to people in the organization rather than anyone. Anyone is still technically allowed in OneDrive, but it's defaulting to people within the organization. So we can choose what that actually looks like. And then we can also choose like what's the default associated with that. Can they edit or can they view? So what we're talking about there is once like we apply the link setting, is it set to like read only, or is it set to allow editing? And this just let me go back to like here. Which one of these is it associated with? And then down below, these links have to expire after N number of days. You can set the policy. So you can say 30 days, and then the user can share something, but they can make that window shorter. They cannot, however, extend that beyond what you've set for the organization. And then you can choose, these links give these types of permissions, files and folders inside of there. All right, so just explain that all to you. Now, another area that you can manage some of this is in the SharePoint Admin Center, but specifically in the site section. Now, we went to policies and sharing first, so I just showed you that in the screenshots. But if you go to the SharePoint Admin Center and then you go to per a site, the sites category, and you choose active sites, you can select a site, and then from that site, you can choose the external sharing that's available for that site. So each site can actually be independent of the larger organization. So we can narrow it down to some sites with more stringent sharing capabilities, and other sites a little bit looser or less permissive if we need it. So I can choose like my site here, and then I can say, well, we can say anyone, new and existing guests, people in the organization, limit sharing by domain. So we can go on a site-by-site basis, and we can open up some of that external sharing as well. And then this just breaks down the different settings. I just screenshotted it a little bit more, and then kind of how it applies. So like if I say like new and existing guests or only people in the domain, it's what the people or what users are going to be able to see from that sharing command inside of the site or in Office or in Microsoft Teams. So we're getting close to the end. I'm going to try and I'm going to stick around, take some Q&A for everyone. But just a couple of best practices. I do strongly recommend that you do not deal with attachments anymore, that you share and you actually copy links instead. And Microsoft also recommends the same thing. And just quickly, I'll show you this. So if I head into my Outlook, and let's say I want to send a message to someone. All right, so I'm just going to send this to like my Gmail account. All right, so I'm just going to use that. Test 1, 2, 3. And let's say I go to attach a file. I can browse my computer, or it's going to say you can reference one of these. I'm just going to browse my computer and grab a file. So project scope document. All right, and as part of that process, I'm going to be able to say, well, do you want to upload this into OneDrive? How do you want to manage that? If I upload it into OneDrive, I can turn it into a shared link. So now I'm in here, anyone in the organization, and then I'm going to be able to control the access with that pretty much from here. So those are some different options that you now have. So rather than sending attachments, I often upload right into OneDrive, use Office Online, OneDrive in my web browser, or Outlook Online, and then you can send that as a link, and then use version history and track changes versus sending different copies of the same document. If you send attachments in email, you're going to have duplicates. You're going to have to reconcile that. Share copy link's going to work. Version history is going to track all your changes. It's a win for everybody. Generate the most restrictive link types that you need. So, put your permissions on top of it and limit what people can do with that. Do it at the admin level, but teach your users what these links actually mean. Stay away from anonymous links if possible. That means like anyone. I turn a lot of times, I go ahead and turn anyone off because it's transferable, internal and external, and anyone can actually mean anyone. They're convenient, but like we really want to know who has access to the content. We want peace of mind on top of that. And then turn on the organizational setting for the expiration date. Have a 30-day, 45-day limit on top of that. Go into the admin center, click, go into sharing, and then set the expiration date on top of that, and then all the links expire after n number of days. Set the default for your organization. If you find users are sending things unsecurely, set the default for them. You're guiding them into, using specific people versus people in the organization, or using people in the organization versus the anyone link. Set the default link for those users, guide them, while still providing some controls around that. So that's all I've got for this particular presentation. That was a lot in the last, hour and 15 minutes. There were some really good questions and comments going on in the chat window. I'm going to take some additional questions if any of those if any of you have any of those questions, or if you have comments or war stories that you want to share. But I do thank you for all for being here, for your time and your participation. I'm going to post this on our YouTube channel and get that out there. And with that, I'll open it up for Q&A.